In today's episode, we're taking a look at 5 fantastic remasters of classic games in 2025. To be completely transparent, I captured all of the gameplay on my Xbox Series X because that's where I own all of these titles, but these are also on PlayStation 5 and they're virtually identical, so it doesn't really matter either way. And with all that being said, let's get to our first title. And the first game on our list is going to be Star Wars Dark Forces, released for PC in 1995 and then remastered by Night Dive Studios in 2024. Man, I have loved this game for many years. I played it when it first came out on PC when I was a kid. I've loved it ever since. And the only console port that ever came out for it was on the PlayStation 1, which is a decent port, don't get me wrong, but I wanted another version of it to come out at some point, and it never did until Night Dive Studios remastered it, and boy did they do a fantastic job. So for me, a great remaster needs to do a couple of different things. First off, anything that was blatantly flawed in the original, whether it be control issues or performance issues or whatever the case may be that don't make the experience better, they were just of the time, they fixed those things. Basically just quality of life improvements. Secondly, maintaining the nostalgia and giving you options. Now, not every single remaster gives you these options, but when they do, it is very nice, and Night Dive Studios is incredible at it. The different graphical options you have in this Dark Forces remaster are rather robust yet simple. You have total remasters of the cutscenes. Now, I'm not going to lie, once you've watched the new ones, it's kind of tough to go back to the old, but I love that it's there. The same goes for the in-game graphics. When you have all the bells and whistles turned on, the sprites look beautiful, the environments look great, you're able to change your field of view, the skybox looks better, everything just looks way better, less pixelated, more crisp, with better detail. And that's not even mentioning its performance, which it runs at a 4K resolution, 60 frames per second, and as high as 120 frames per second with some of these recent updates, so it runs fantastic. But if you're really nostalgic for the way it used to look, or more like it used to look, you actually have the option to either have a little bit of the best of both worlds or completely downgrade it to a 4:3 screen with pixelated graphics. It's really cool. I love these graphical settings because there are people that prefer the old style graphics, but at the very least it helps you appreciate how much better this looks when you have all the bells and whistles turned on. Easily one of the most welcome and dramatic updates to this remaster are the analog controls. Looking around with analog joystick versus pressing a button to look up or down, pressing buttons to look left and right is completely different. It's a game changer. Like I said before, the controls are better, the performance is better, everything is just better with more options. That's how you make a fantastic remaster, and Dark Forces from Night Dive Studios is incredible at that. Now put aside all of the remastered perks, and at the end of the day, you still have a classic shooter here. While there's probably some back in the day that just called it a Doom clone, it's really more than that. It's a very excellent Star Wars game, and it's very authentic to the films in a number of ways. The majority of the enemies are very familiar and straight out of the films. The sound effects are super authentic and really well done. The level designs are complex, there's a lot of places to go, a lot of secrets. The gunplay feels good. All the weapons that are from the films are authentic, and the ones they made up for the game are very cool, with a lot of detail, and they look and sound great. Although I must admit, throwing thermal detonators is not exactly great, but that's of the time. The story is actually pretty cool, and they did a good job of incorporating the likeness of actors and characters to feel connected to the movies. As far as I know, it's not considered canon, but who cares? And that's what makes this game special, especially if you're a Star Wars fan as well as a Doom fan, if you just like old school shooters. Now, is it perfect? Well, of course not. Some of the mission objectives can be obscure and annoying. The subterranean and hideout level is a nightmare as it's always been. Sometimes you feel like you're struggling with ammo and health. You will definitely find yourself going around in circles, backtracking, confused, trying to figure out what to do next in order to progress to the level, so it's not exactly perfectly designed in aspect, but once again, let's be fair, that's of the time. Even to this day, they struggle with mission objectives being well thought out. Some of the enemies, particularly the turrets, can be a little bit too powerful to where they really pulverize you, but just because the game isn't perfect doesn't mean it's not a classic. This is a very nostalgic game that I've loved since I was a kid. It still holds up to this day really well, especially with what Night Dive Studios did to bring this remaster to the consoles and make it better than ever. That's what I love about these remasters, particularly for old school PC games, because it takes the game that we knew was amazing on PC, that we couldn't quite play that way on consoles, it brings them to consoles in modern era and makes them even better than they were originally on PC at their highest settings. And for those of us that grew up with consoles and weren't able to have the PC rigs that we wanted, it's a really nice treat. Whether you're checking it out for the first time or reliving your childhood, you should absolutely check out Dark Forces Remastered. Hopefully they do a Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2, which is also a classic that to this day is only on PC and Steam, whereas all the other Jedi Knights have actually made it to consoles. That's the only one that hasn't, so hopefully we'll see that sometime. And the next title is going to be Gargoyles, released for the Sega Genesis in 1995 and then remastered in 2023. Man, growing up, I absolutely loved Saturday morning cartoons back in the 90s. X-Men, Batman, the Hulk, so many favorites, but Gargoyles was one of my absolute favorites. As well as the toys. The toys were really cool. They were some of my favorite action figures I ever had. There was just something special about the 90s. The cartoons, the toys, the games. What a time to be alive. I love the 90s. So I've always enjoyed Gargoyles on the Sega Genesis ever since I rented it for the first time when it first came out. Although it is a very tough game, so I didn't beat it as a kid, but it is a very cool one. And to this day, I'm very impressed with the animation in Gargoyles. Very similar to how Aladdin had really impressive animation on the Sega Genesis. When it comes to the remastered features, they did a complete overhaul of the 2D graphics, but the nice thing about it is you're able to switch between the old graphics and the new graphics anytime you choose, similar to Halo Master Chief Collection, by the mere press of a button. The graphics were overhauled as well as the sound. But it plays exactly like you remember, even with all the overhauled visuals and audio. Now, due to the fact that it plays virtually identical to how it always did, that does come with some of its inherent flaws. The game is really tough and can be frustrating at times. Some of the enemies can be pretty cheap. There are some platforming segments that can be quite annoying. Don't get me wrong though, the game actually has a good feel to it playing as Goliath. Busting through floors, flying through walls, taking out enemies, it really does have a nice flow to it at times. Especially when you become more and more familiar with the maps and you get better at the game. But there are some segments that are pretty painfully annoying, where if you don't have the timing down exactly with jumping from one wall to the next wall and having fireballs coming after you, knocking you down, or spikes coming out of the walls, it can be pretty frustrating. But what helps alleviate this is that not only can you put it on easy, but there's also a rewind feature, so that at least helps with some of the frustrations. Some would say it's a cop-out, some would say you shouldn't even have the option, but I don't mind it when I'm getting frustrated with some really old-school difficult segments. Compared to other 2D platformers of the time, Goliath actually has a pretty decent moveset. Many other platformers where it's not necessarily considered a full beat-em-up tend to have more simplistic controls where you only have like one or two different moves and just simply jumping around in basic movement. This, on the other hand, actually has a little bit more complexity to all the different movements you're able to do. There are a lot of optional secrets to discover, and what's nice about the continue system when you die is you respawn right where you died, you don't start over again, so that's actually pretty nice. So like I said, the game is not perfect, it has some frustrating elements to it, but the remaster helps smooth some of those elements out with the rewind feature and being able to change the difficulty, as well as being able to save anywhere you like, so it really does cater to how you want to play it. But this is a classic side-scrolling action game from one of the greatest franchises ever that hopefully we'll see some sort of return of because, man, that cartoon series, it was just so good. Gargoyles is awesome. And this is the perfect way to relive the game or play it for the first time. So Gargoyles Remastered, you should check it out. And next we have Beyond Good and Evil, released for all consoles and PC back in 2003. And this 20th anniversary edition was released in 2024. So I've actually been playing Beyond Good and Evil since I first got it on the original Xbox back in 2003. I've always loved the game. It has an awesome soundtrack, cool story, really varied and fun gameplay. It's a really good game. So it was really cool for this 20th anniversary edition to come out with all of its improvements. Because the original did have a couple problems. One issue that drove me nuts for many years were the camera controls. Even the HD remaster of it that came out the first time back in 2011 on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 didn't solve this control problem. So as a player, I prefer inverted controls. I've been doing that since Star Fox on the Super Nintendo. So in the case of Beyond Good and Evil, when you invert the controls, you don't just invert the Y-axis, it also inverted the X-axis, which I did not want. I prefer left to be left, right to be right, and then inversion of the Y-axis. That's how I play everything. And speaking of the HD edition, which was a pretty good remaster of the game, it does look a little bit better. This 20th anniversary edition blows it out of the water. Enhanced textures, added lighting effects and shadows. So the added lighting effects really accentuate the night and day cycles with this remaster. Better resolution, everything is improved across the board, as well as some added cosmetic items, which doesn't hurt. So overall, this 20th anniversary remaster is far superior to the HD edition from 2011. In pretty much every way. There's always been something special about Beyond Good and Evil, and that's why it has a fan base. When it comes to the game itself, it has an interesting story that draws you in very quickly. You really care about your home and the orphans that stay there. There's something special about the first time you're exploring the lighthouse and that piano music kicks in from the soundtrack. It has such an atmosphere and tranquility to it. You don't see in games very often. It really puts you in that world. And also right away you discover how important the camera mechanics are. And they're actually really well implemented, and even me, who doesn't typically care that much about camera mechanics in games, Pokemon Snap for example, for those that love that, this on the other hand really did grab me. It's really cool knowing that each and every living, moving creature that you take a picture of, you're able to submit to the Science Institute, and you get money and points for it towards another pearl, which you're able to upgrade your motorboat with. So everything you do contributes towards upgrading your character and your equipment. So it's actually very satisfying finding each and every creature in the world of the game to gain these abilities and all these upgrades. The game is actually very cinematic at this living, breathing world. It does a very good job of this. There's also a lot of mini games throughout Good and Evil that are very fun to play. They're not overly difficult, and you get a lot of benefits by playing them. You don't feel like you're doing it just for filler. It's actually enjoyable. So there's a lot of variety in the gameplay with this. The combat is also quite solid, nothing revolutionary, but very solid, especially for the time. All the secrets, exploration, unlocking one thing to the next. Having Paige along the way adds variety to the combat, and he's also a very fun character. Voice performances and characters are just all well done across the board. Whether you're racing, doing minigames, chasing pirates, pursuing the actual main missions, whatever the case may be, whether you're playing it for the first time or re-experiencing it as a fan like I am, it's a fantastic game you should absolutely check out, Beyond Good and Evil 20th Anniversary Edition. Our next title is going to be Metal Wolf Chaos, released for the original Xbox only in Japan in 2004, and then remastered and re-released worldwide in 2019. So I actually knew nothing about Metal Wolf Chaos for many years due to the fact that it was only in Japan, but by the time this remaster came out and I saw that it had quite the cult following, I wanted to give it a chance, as well as the fact that it's a From Software title. And I was pleasantly surprised. This game is not only a lot of fun, but it's absolutely hilarious with the premise. While Metal Wolf doesn't give an exact year, clearly it takes place around the year 2025 in a satirical version of America, where the 47th president, President Wilson, has been taken out of power by a coup d'etat led by his vice president, thereby putting the United States under martial law. Meanwhile, President Wilson, who happens to be the fictional relative of Woodrow Wilson, took it upon himself to create a secret war machine, or mech, that is able to climb in and go across the country liberating all the states and cities. All along the way, you have your secretary talking to you, giving you mission objectives. The voice acting is absolutely hilarious in this. It really is this side of Helldivers 2, the liberty and freedom, over-the-top patriotic themes in this. It's really great. It's really insane to think about how this is over 20 years ago they did this. Now, to be honest, as a remastered, it doesn't have too many bells and whistles here. It was really just a way for them to bring it to North America. It looks really crisp at a 4K resolution and a 16:9 widescreen presentation, but it only runs at 30 frames per second, which is unfortunate. It's too bad they didn't try to make it run at 60. But I'm sure it's a more stable 30 FPS than it was able to be on the original Xbox, because there's a lot of chaos in the game, so I'm sure it bogged down. Along with the lack of a higher frame rate, I have an additional gripe. When you die, it restarts the entire map every time, and that really does bog the experience down. Otherwise, I don't have too many gripes. This game is a lot of fun. The weapon customization is actually well done. You have up to 4 weapons, 2 per shoulder, so you're able to mix and match any way you want. Some weapons take up 2 slots, but whatever the case, you're able to mix and match any way you like. Pistols, shotguns, machine guns, flamethrowers, grenade launchers, you name it, there's a ton of weapons in this. And it really does incentivize you to replay the levels, so there's a lot of replayability here, so that you get more points, higher scores, so that you're able to research different weapons and equip more combinations, and just further upgrade your mech in general. So if you want something that's hilarious with great political and social satire, old school arcade style action with lots of guns and combinations and things to unlock, or if you're even a From Software Armored Core fan, you're going to be at home here. So Metal Wolf Chaos, you should check it out. It holds up better than ever in 2025. And before we get to our last video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on the video. I love talking to the community. It's a lot of fun, so I'm excited to hear from you all. And finally, we have The Thing. Originally released in 2002 on PC and consoles, and then remastered by Night Dive Studios in 2024. One thing I can easily say, if you're a fan of the film, you're going to absolutely love this game, because it is a direct sequel to the movie, which is very cool. and it's actually really well done. Because originally the game was an absolute diamond in the rough, had a lot of potential, everybody liked it, but it was really tough to play because it had a lot of technical issues. It was very ambitious at the time, and on consoles, it had a pretty rough time. Because I remember liking it a lot on the original Xbox, but I never fully beat it because it was really tough to get through. But now that we have this Night Dive Studios remaster, it's fantastic. Not perfect, but it's fantastic. The image quality is vastly improved. It looks fantastic at 4K and running at 60 frames per second, so it runs really great. The atmosphere in this game is as amazing as ever. That's one of the huge strong points of this. It has dreadful atmosphere, which is great. And the voice acting is really solid here. It really sucks you in like a good film. And of course, you hear multiple famous voice actors here, so it's no surprise. Now, one minor complaint I've had, and it's always been the case, it's just the nature of this game. It has an initial learning curve that you have to get over. But once you get through it, it gets a lot easier. But that's actually what's pretty helpful about the very beginning segment. It does ease you into it somewhat, but it still takes some doing to figure it all out because there's a lot going on. Because you're not just running around by yourself, you have a party of up to 3 additional guys with you, and they all react differently to the situation. You're able to check on their status, whether they're scared or feeling normal, if they trust you, don't trust you. You're able to equip them or unequip them with weapons, heal them. So you really have to manage your party. And there's always that factor of who's a thing and who's not. It's always there. It's always lingering. I don't want to show too much of this, to be honest, because there really is something special about going in blind and not knowing what's going to happen next. And there is an element of randomness to it that's really impressive. And that's always been the case. That feeling of uneasiness, the lack of trust to your other party members, and not knowing what's going to happen next and what's around the corner really is like the movie. That was one of the great things about the movie, and it's captured here very well. Like I said, it's a learning curve, and there's some little control issues you got to get used to and whatnot because it is unconventional, but it's worth it. Just stick with it, and it only gets better. And Night Dive really did a subtle job here of improving the visuals, but it really does feel true to the original. But one thing they did to the graphics that doesn't take away from the nostalgia at all, but it adds a great layer to it, are the dynamic lighting effects. The lighting effects are vastly improved, and it adds so much more atmosphere to it. It's fantastic. This is how you remaster a classic game like this. It takes away none of the nostalgia. It's just better. If you want good atmosphere, you want scares, you're a fan of The Thing or John Carpenter already, whatever the case, you cannot go wrong with The Thing. It's a very fascinating game with dreadful atmosphere, and it's awesome. So that was 5 fantastic remasters of classic games. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want more nostalgia, check out my recent video where I revisited 5 awful games that I loved as a kid from my childhood. And it's likely these games were in your childhood too. Thanks again for watching. God bless and have a wonderful day.